All right, welcome to episode 4 of the Carnism Debunked podcast. This is quite a special one because it's the first podcast so far where the focus of discussion will be on something completely unrelated to veganism and animal rights. My guest today is Patricia Nonis, known as That Vegan Lawyer on YouTube, and we'll be discussing the infamous Michael Jackson allegations that shocked the world ever since the first one, dating back to 1993. Pat is an Australian qualified lawyer who has poured rigorously, more than anyone I know actually, over each and every allegation against Michael Jackson. And in this episode, she will aim to present a case for Michael Jackson's 100% innocence of all wrongdoing. We'll be going through each and every allegation made against him, going in chronological order from the first one right to the most recent ones that were presented in the notorious Leaving Neverland documentary. If you're listening on YouTube, I'll leave timestamps below the video so you can go to each individual allegation. But wherever you're listening, I hope you find this a fascinating listen, particularly if you're convinced of Michael's guilt, as it would be very interesting to hear your perspective and opinions on this after listening. So Pat, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, George. I'm really excited to talk about the Michael allegations with you. I know it's something we both connect over. So yeah, I'm really just excited to get into it and discuss why there's absolutely no evidence for his guilt in any of the accusations made against him.
So let's start where it all began. So it's the early 90s. Michael Jackson is a global superstar, an icon of pop music, cherished worldwide with millions of adoring fans. Not a bad word against him. Then in 1993, something happens. What happened?
Okay, so prior to 93, around the early 90s, he befriended a young boy named Jordan Chandler. I think they actually met. It was some funny situation, like there was a car breakdown, and that's sort of how he met Jordan Chandler. And he also became friends with his mom, June Chandler. And in the initial days, actually, he also got along, reasonably well with the father, Evan Chandler. But soon the relationships kind of deteriorate between Michael Jackson and Evan due to a variety of reasons, which we can get into. But ultimately, what happens is Evan Chandler accuses Michael Jackson of molesting his son. And it's not for quite some time before Evan actually agrees. Jordan actually agrees that anything sexual happened between him and Michael. So we can unpack some of that if you have any questions.
Yeah. So just to clarify, Jordy didn't make the allegation. It was Evan that made an allegation. How did that kind of happen then? If it wasn't Jordy who was actually saying something, and it was Evan who's made a statement, and then Jordy says something eventually, what kind of happened there?
Yeah. So to understand why Evan made those allegations, we have to look at the circumstances surrounding him and Michael's relationship. So Michael became very close with Jordan Chandler as friends, and also with the mom, June. And there was also some rumors going around at the time that Michael Jackson had a bit of a crush on the wife, the mom, June Chandler. And when you read about their relationships in this case and what people close to the parties have said about it, I think there was definitely a feeling of like Evan was being sort of threatened by the dynamic, because he sort of, I think, perceived Michael as maybe taking over, maybe being too close with his wife and son. So when you take that and couple it with the fact that Evan had previously demanded Michael Jackson help him out with, scripts, because he was a dentist, but he was also pursuing a sort of career in Hollywood. So he wanted to be a writer and all these other things. And when Michael didn't really help him with that in the way that he wanted, we start seeing these allegations happening. And so, yeah, as you said, Evan Chandler was making the allegations long before Jordan was pressured into agreeing to them. And that's essentially how it manifested.
What exactly did Evan Chandler accuse Michael of doing to his son?
Essentially, he said that there was a sexual relationship happening. So sexual molestation, assault, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm just going to play now the clip of Michael talking about when he was first, this was his statement when this first allegation was made against him. So I'm just going to play that clip now. This is fresh after this first allegation that kind of shook the world.
There have been many disgusting statements made recently concerning allegations of improper conduct on my part. These statements about me are totally false, As I have maintained from the very beginning, I am hoping for a speedy end to this horrifying experience to which I have been subjected. I shall not in this statement respond to all of the false allegations being made against me, since my lawyers have advised me that this is not the proper forum in which to do that. I will say that I am particularly upset by the handling of this mass matter by the incredible, terrible mass media. At every opportunity, the media has dissected and manipulated these allegations to reach their own conclusions. I ask all of you to wait and hear the truth before you label or condemn me. Don't treat me like a criminal, because I am innocent. I have been forced to submit to a dehumanizing and humiliating examination by the Santa Barbara County Sheriff Department and the Los Angeles Police Department earlier this week. They served a search warrant on me which allowed them to view and photograph my body, including my penis, my buttocks, my lower torso, thighs, and any other area that they wanted. They were supposedly looking for any discoloration, spotting, blotches, or other evidence of a skin color disorder called vitiligo, which I have previously spoken about. The warrant also directed me to cooperate in any examination of my body by their physician to determine the condition of my skin, including whether I have vitiligo or any other skin disorder. The warrant further stated that I had no right to refuse the examination or photographs, and if I failed to cooperate with them, they would introduce that refusal at any trial as an indication of my guilt. It was the most humiliating ordeal of my life, one that no person should ever have to suffer. And even after experiencing the indignity of this search, the parties involved were still not satisfied and wanted to take even more pictures. It was a nightmare, a horrifying nightmare. But if this is what I have to endure to prove my innocence, my complete innocence, so be it. Throughout my life, I have only tried to help thousands upon thousands of children to live happy lives. It brings tears to my eyes when I see any child who suffers. I am not guilty of these allegations, but if I am guilty of anything, it is of giving all that I have to give to help children all over the world. It is of loving children of all ages and races. It is of gaining sheer joy from seeing children with their innocent and smiling faces. It is of enjoying through them the childhood that I missed myself. If I am guilty of anything, it is of believing what God said about children. Suffer little children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for such is the kingdom of heaven. In no way do I think that I am God, but I do try to be God-like in my heart. I am totally innocent of any wrongdoing, and I know these terrible allegations will all be proven false. Again, to my friends and fans, thank you very much for all of your support. Together, we will see this through to the very end. I love you very much, and may God bless you all. I love you. Goodbye.
Okay, so I mean, listening to that, I mean, it's clear you can really hear the pain in Michael's voice and the stuff that he went through. Because I know, with regards to like the Leaving Neverland documentary, which we'll come to later, a lot of people will watch that and they say stuff like, "How can you fail to believe these guys? Look how genuine they are," and stuff like that. But if you listen to that clip from MJ when he's first accused, does he not sound genuine there? I think there's definitely a lot of pain and stuff you can hear in his voice. And I don't know, some people might say it's crocodile tears or whatever, but how did you feel when you saw that?
I'm not particular, I understand what you're saying. It's very sincere. I absolutely more sincere and authentic than what I've seen of Wade Robson or Safechuck or any of the accusers. And when you consider it with the evidence on both sides, it's very clear to me it is a sincere declaration. It's a plea for his innocence and to not believe everything the media is saying about him. But I'm not, I don't find it persuasive on its own. And I don't really, when I was making an assessment on all these cases, it wasn't, I don't know if it was as persuasive for me as it was for you. Not saying that it was persuasive for you on its own, but I think when you assess it with everything else that we're about to talk about, it does become very clear it is an authentic voice.
Yeah. Now, he mentioned in that clip that we played that he was subjected to a humiliating strip search. Was anything found in that strip search that either contradicts Michael Jackson's story that he was innocent, or that contradicts Evan Chandler's story that Michael had molested his son?
Okay, so this is where it can appear seemingly grey, I think, because the circumstances surrounding that was basically, it was said that Jordan Chandler was able to identify some kind of mark on Michael Jackson's private parts, basically. So that led to the strip search happening. But there was a lot of contradicting evidence even in that, because he also said that Michael Jackson was circumcised when he wasn't. And you also have to consider the fact that the detective Snedden, the lead investigator, really had the personal relationship between Michael Jackson and Snedden was not good. So when you look at the motives of everyone, it's just not that convincing that, because we don't have access to, John Chandler I think he drew the mark that supposedly resembled what Michael Jackson had, but we don't have access to those documents. And without access to what he actually drew and how similar it was, it's really hard for me to make an objective judgment on that. But we do know that, Detective Snedden and Michael Jackson had a very bad relationship. People say that he was out to get Michael Jackson, but once you actually read into like these circumstances, it does kind of seem convincing that he did have a personal vendetta against Jackson. The second thing is that we don't have access to the documents that show how similar these drawings were. And the third thing is he also said Michael Jackson was circumcised when he wasn't. So there's a lot of contradicting information. It wasn't, and if it was really similar, I think that would have been enough to bring enough to prosecute Michael Jackson properly, but it never surfaced. So that's all the information we have on that, which is not a lot. Because he could have just drew a mark and they would have been like, oh, this is kind of similar. Let's use this against him.
I think that's a good point, because I think a lot of people can get caught up on the fact that, he identified this mark or whatever it is. We don't exactly know what this was. I mean, what does that mean when they say that? As you say, we've not seen this. Yeah. And it is well known that Michael Jackson did have vitiligo. So he could have just said something like, there was a blotch or... And Michael does say that in the clip. He says they were trying to identify, marks of a skin condition called vitiligo. But I guess that is one thing that a lot of people will indeed say that contradicts Chandler's statement. There is that Michael Jackson wasn't circumcised, and apparently Jordy said he was. How convinced are you that Jordy was willing to go along with this? For if you're saying that Jordy is this never happened to Jordy, that would indicate that Jordy surely would not want to go along with that. What would make him want to go along with it?
Well, I think it shows that he didn't want anything to do with this by the fact that he refused to testify, by the fact that Thomas Mesereau, Michael Jackson's lawyer, said in a lecture years later that he actually approached Jordan and had a conversation with him, and Jordan said that nothing happened. The fact that Jordan legally emancipated his parents later that year, once because this case settled out of court, Michael Jackson gave them a payout, and he legally divorced his parents. And to prove, to even do that, you have to prove so much to a judge that your parents are completely incompetent, that they've harmed you in some way. There's so many people don't understand this. There's so many things you have to prove to meet the criteria to legitimately divorce your parents. So I'm very convinced that he wanted nothing to do with this case.
Can you explain what that means from the legal perspective? Divorce your parents? Because I've only ever really heard this before in a relationship. You divorce your husband or wife. What does it mean if you divorce your parents? Yeah,
so the proper legal term is a legal emancipation. And when I was covering this case previously last year, whenever it was, I downloaded the documents that you needed to read and have signed from the Californian state of law, whatever it was, to legally divorce your parents. And basically it's just severing that relationship. They're no longer legally defined as your parents. You basically have nothing to do with them in legal terms. And as I said, in order to successfully do that, the child needs to prove certain things about the relationship. And these things are basically that your parents are completely incompetent to look after you, and that you can financially look after yourself. And he, John Chandler was getting a massive payout from this whole case, so he could easily prove that. But yeah, it's an extremely hard thing to do. I can't just go there and be like, oh, my parents won't buy me an Xbox, I want to legally divorce them. You got to show, disclose to the judge very important things which show that your parents are completely incompetent. And to me, both the June and Evan were.
Now, just picking up on what people have said when they've met Jordy Chandler. So you say Thomas Mesereau met Jordy Chandler and Chandler said nothing happened. There was also a story when Jordy went to uni. I think it was New York State University he went to. What did his alleged female friend there say? This girl was on the documentary Square One. She claims to be a friend of Chandler's at uni. What did she say about Jordy at uni?
Yeah, so according to that person at NYU who was relatively friendly with Jordy, pretty sure the first time she met him, he was wearing a Thriller t-shirt or something like this. They went to similar parties together. He was doing Michael Jackson's Move, playing his music. This isn't the behavior of someone that's been sexually abused. Like, I'm sorry. It's been years later. And if he's pulling Michael Jackson's Move and moonwalking and wearing his t-shirts, this is more evidence of Michael Jackson's initial innocence. And keep in mind, we haven't heard one word from Jordan Chandler since this whole thing happened. It's been, a number of years now. I think a picture of John Chandler is actually worth like $700,000. I've heard really high amounts of money, because when you look at the cases in full, this is the only case with any real gray areas, even though the gray areas are even, trying to prove his guilt are not convincing at all to me, relatively compared to the other ones. It's a little bit more ambiguous sometimes. So yeah, people really want to get in touch with Jordan Chandler, but he doesn't want anything to do with it. And I think the Square One documentary with the student that went to the same university as him, I found her quite credible, because if she's going on this big documentary and lying about him, surely, if not him, he would have hired a lawyer or someone to stop this from happening. And just, she can't just say things about him that aren't true. So yeah, when you add all the evidence up for the 93 case, it's very persuasive to me that there isn't any hard evidence for the accusations made against Michael Jackson by the boy's father, not by Jordan Chandler.
Yeah, and I think even more damning than that, from what I heard from Chandler's uni friend, is that apparently they were all discussing Michael Jackson being a paedophile at a party, and Jordy Chandler walked in to this conversation. So obviously they're feeling a bit awkward, like, oh, kind of thing. And then apparently Jordy Chandler says, oh, no, I don't think he could ever do anything like that.
Yeah.
To the group of people talking about Michael Jackson. Now, again, I have no idea how credible this person is, but you do make a good point here that surely he would have said something. But that is what confuses me about Jordy Chandler. Why hasn't he said anything since this whole case? Why has he never said he did do it? Why has he never said he didn't do it publicly? What's the deal with that?
Okay, you got to put yourself in Jordan Chandler's position. He went through this when he was 13 years old, and assuming that Michael Jackson didn't abuse him, which I believe that he didn't because there's no evidence. He divorced his parents afterwards. It was an incredible, stressful time. His dad tried to come at him with a dumbbell a couple of years later because he's crazy. His relationship with his mom completely deteriorated. He saw how the media destroyed Michael Jackson and other celebrities in the limelight. What the fuck? Who in their rational mind would want anything to do with the press or coming forward, or even if it helped, even if it helped Michael Jackson's proving his innocence, it's not worth completely damaging your well-being. I know that sounds a bit selfish, but even if he did come forward, it would just be another fucking drama with these people. They'll be like, oh, Jordan Chandler's word against Wade Robson, and just turn it into a big drama. It's just not worth it. I think he's actually smart to just take the $18 million and start a new life, which is what he did.
Now, that is going to be the big question that people are asking. People are going to say, why did Michael Jackson pay them off if he was innocent? Why would he do that?
Yeah, so he's it's kind of the same reason, because if he said already that he didn't want it dragged out like the big O.J. Simpson trial, and then it's like, this big media circus, which is essentially what happened in the 2005 trial, which I know we're going to speak about shortly. So to him, $20 million is nothing. Michael Jackson was worth what, $500-600 million, probably more in the peak of his time.
Yeah.
$20 million is nothing just to keep someone quiet. If I was in his position, I think that's a pretty rational thing to do, especially when you have a close relationship with this kid already, and you're thinking about his well-being, what's it going to do to him to make this whole thing go to court. I think from his perspective, just a payout is a rational thing to do. And it's not just him. Lots of people who are innocent, who are charged with these, ridiculous accusations, they just pay people out. And it might make people question their integrity or their guilt, but from their perspective of their well-being, it's a rational thing to do.
So this is a common thing celebrities do. You get celebrities all the time. They'll be accused of all sorts of things and they'll just pay people off.
Yeah. So it is very common. And keep in mind that Michael Jackson isn't just acting alone. So it's like, oh, I'm going to pay them out. He's working on the advice of maybe 5-10 different top lawyers. And if this is what they're telling him, and I'm not his lawyer. I'm not, I wasn't there or anything like that, but that would be the advice I would give, considering all things, it's easier to pay someone off and have the problem go away rather than have it go to trial and have it affect a kid, someone you really care about, and all these other family members and the press, and then we saw it happen in 2005, which greatly damaged his mental health. So yeah, and the way I see it, it's very rational to pay someone off, and the pros outweigh the cons in this case.
Yeah.
And he did want to go to trial, but he was advised, he said repeatedly that he did want to have his innocence proved, but he ultimately acted on the advice of, his legal advisors, which I think is smart.
Now, June Chandler, who's Jordy's mother, did she ever go along with this allegation, or was this just Evan?
To the best of my knowledge, she always said that nothing inappropriate ever happened between Michael and Jordy. She always had a relatively good relationship with Michael Jackson. As I said before, there was rumors that he sort of liked her a little bit, and he did spoil the family, buy them jewelry and take them on trips and everything like that. So she, to the best of my knowledge, never supported this view that Michael was a predator or anything like that. And yeah, so that's basically all I know of her relationship with Michael, and obviously her and Evan didn't have a good relationship either.
I'm gonna play a very damning tape recording now that I think is going to change a lot of people's minds on this, certainly on this first allegation. So there's a leaked phone call between Evan Chandler, that was Jordy Chandler's father, and one of his friends or something. I can't remember who exactly the person was. But listen to what he says. So this is the famous, but not famous enough, in my opinion, tape recording of what Evan Chandler said.
This man is going to be humiliated beyond belief. He will not believe it. He will not believe what's going to happen. Beyond his worst nightmares. Sell one more record. This attorney I found, I interviewed several, and I picked the nastiest son of a bitch I could find. Once I make that phone call, this guy is just going to destroy everybody in sight. Any devious, nasty, cruel way that he can do it. And I've given him full authority to do that. It'll be a massacre if I don't get what I want. If I go through with this, I win big time. I will get everything I want, and they will be destroyed forever. They will be destroyed. June is going to lose Jordy. She will have no right to ever see him again. Yeah. That's fact, Dave. That's what's going to happen. Michael's career will be over. Does that help Jordy? Michael's career will be over. And does that help Jordy? That's irrelevant to me.
Wow. What a piece of shit, that guy. Firstly, this rings so many bells because, firstly, who speaks like that about getting justice for their son who's just been molested? That's not the way you would talk about that. You'd be very sad and you'd be going, we hope we can get justice done. This is a horrible crime that's happening to them. We're so upset about it. Who sits there going, oh, I'm going to win big. Watch this. And then at the end of the clip, the guy's saying to them, and this is good for Jordy Howe. And he just goes, I don't care about that. So this was never, it should be pretty clear to anyone listening now that, that this first case, at least, is just complete fraud. I don't know how anyone can listen to that clip and think that this is any kind of a legitimate allegation anymore. For me, that just puts the nail in the coffin, at least for this first allegation. Go on.
And if you say that about this first allegation, in my view, the 2005 allegations and the Wade Robson and Safechuck allegations are even more ridiculous than this one. And this one is ridiculous in itself. Because if, like, I completely agree with what you're saying, and like, even if I would still find it really morally repugnant if he mentioned as well, like, oh, and I want to, you know, keep my son safe and I want to hold Jackson responsible, even if that he said that has an ancillary statement, like even if money was more important to him and revenge or any of these other like petty dilemmas he's having, and then he said, oh, and I also want to, but he doesn't even mention his, it gets no mention whatsoever. He doesn't even talk about whether Michael Jackson's guilty or not. Is, you know, it's very clear to me when you consider this leaked statement in consideration with the other facts that we just discussed. It's very persuasive that Michael Jackson is innocent in the 93 allegations and in the other ones that we're about to talk about.
I think the motive becomes clear as well for anyone asking why he would do this. It seems like it's jealousy over not being as present a father as he could be, because I think it was kind of jealousy aimed at MJ because he thought MJ was kind of like fathering Jordy. So he's separated from June, and she has custody of Jordy, right? And then he's going around Michael's house and they're always having a great time and he's hardly seeing his son. And that's why he seems to really have it in for MJ. And he's saying, this guy will not sell one more record and blah, blah. You know, I'll get everything I want. I'll get Jordy back. So he just sounds like a very bitter, twisted son of a bitch who just wanted to get back at MJ, basically, because MJ was spending more time with his son than he was.
Yeah, he's highly vindictive, and as you said, it's just the jealousy thing. He's obviously insecure in his capabilities as a father, and I think on some very fundamental psychological paternal kind of level, maybe there was like an echo of, you know, maybe I should be a better dad, or, you know, maybe he did feel kind of protective over Jordy, but it's so secondary to his own feelings. It's more about him, you know, oh, I should be the one doing this, I should be, you know. So it's it's very clear to me what's happening with this leaked statement, and I think this alone proves a lot, you know, even without the other things we just discussed. This shows motive, and it shows us his complete lack of understanding or caring about the own well-being of his son. Yeah.
Now, I think, you know, another thing that we really need to mention here is, and it just shows the depravity of this guy, Evan Chandler, is now this guy was a dentist and had access to, am I right? He was a dentist?
Yeah, he was a dentist. You're talking about the truth serum stuff now,
yes, right? So he had access to these drugs. So this stuff, truth serum. So what happened with this whole truth serum thing?
Yeah, so I'm not really, you know, comfortable in making a conclusive assessment on the accusation against Evan Chandler that he used some kind of drug to, you know, basically drug Jordan and make him more impressionable to ideas of being molested by Michael Jackson. Because when I try to look into it, it's hard to, because it's happened so long ago, and it's hard to get the documents and what evidence, what, you know, who said what. There was the best sort of material I could find on this was an article written by Carrie Fisher, I'm pretty sure her name is, in GQ, talking about whether Michael Jackson was framed or not. And in that, she does mention that Evan Chandler had drugged Jordan Chandler to make him more impressionable. But that was sort of the most reliable source I could find on it. And that's GQ magazine. It's, you know, it's relatively like a legitimate kind of source. And also Evan Chandler never denied it. So this allegation was happening as much as any of the other allegations were happening at the time. And he never said that he didn't. But I'm pretty sure his brother wrote a book, All That Glitters, I'm pretty sure it's called. Yeah. And he denies it in that book. So it's, you know, this is one of these things where to make up your mind, you have to really look into what these parties were doing, what their siblings said, what they said. We know that Evan Chandler's brother wrote a book denying it. Evan Chandler had never denied it, and an article was written in GQ magazine saying that he did drug Jordan Chandler. So you can come to the conclusion you can about that. I haven't made a complete decision on that, but I don't think it's necessary because of everything else that we just discussed. I think proves Michael Jackson's innocence in 93. This is just something else to consider, I think.
Yeah. Now, before we move on to the next case after this, is there any other factors that are worth mentioning here, or do you think that pretty much puts to bed this story about Jordy Chandler, the first allegation? Is there anything else we should mention?
No, I think we covered all the main factors in 93 allegations. We looked at the relationships between Jordan and his father, between June and Evan, between Michael and Jordan, the fact that Jordan never actually wanted to. Years later, he's allegedly at NYU, celebrating basically Michael Jackson. He's legally divorced his parents. Like, what more is there? Like, what more evidence does a reasonable person need to show that Michael Jackson probably didn't molest Jordan Chandler,
And Evan Chandler took these secrets to the grave, right? He died. When did he die?
Committed suicide. He committed suicide. Let me just quickly look at Evan Chandler. So Evan Chandler committed suicide 5th of November 2009. Obviously, he had a lot of emotional issues and other problems. And as I said before, a couple of years after this whole case settled, he came at Jordan Chandler with a dumbbell, like he attacked him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like this, so that's that. And
so he had a lot of issues.
He had a lot of issues, but
did he leave like a suicide note or anything like that? Do we know why he committed suicide?
No, not like to the best of my knowledge. There's no real insight into it. I mean, he wasn't a public figure or anything like that. He was basically made well known because of this case with Michael Jackson. But it's funny the way it's twisted in the media. It's like, Michael Jackson's accuser commits suicide, and they sort of blame it on Michael Jackson. And it's like, you didn't even look at the history of this person or what he's capable of. And you're blaming his suicide on, the man that he's basically he's basically torn apart. Yeah.
All right. So this has all happened. So Michael Jackson has paid them off. It never goes to court in the end. And that issue goes away because he essentially pays them off or whatever, which raises suspicions and that. But I think we've covered enough to hopefully show people that first allegation at least is a load of nonsense. But we move on now to 2005, and suddenly, people are way more convinced now of Michael Jackson's guilt because, a lot of people, at least with that first allegation, were like, well, okay, this is clearly bullshit. But then 2005, Michael Jackson's name is dragged through the mud again. What happens in 2005?
Okay, so I think it's interesting that you say the 93 allegations that the problem is closed. I mean, that problem itself is closed, but what it did was open the floodgates, so to speak, for other people to see, oh my God, all we have to do is hang out with Michael Jackson for a little while, and then we can accuse him of sexual abuse, get our kids to.
And that's what you think.
We can get paid $20 million too.
Yeah, so that's kind of what you think this is all about then, with all these allegations. It sort of empowers false accusers to come forward once one is made.
Oh, absolutely it does, especially when you have a public figure like Michael Jackson who openly likes hanging out with children, who openly likes helping, families who aren't as well off as him. He takes them into their home, invites them into Neverland. People see this and they see, a cash cow basically. And
he's like
Michael Jackson, he's
target.
He's a smart businessman, but he had a soft spot for these type of families and with children as well. So it opens that space for that. And I think he did have a blind spot or naivety when it came to assuming people wouldn't continue to screw him over. And I think he paid for that, like drastically, unfortunately.
Yeah. So now what happens, carrying on, what happens then in 2005?
Okay, so 2005, he befriends another family known as the Arvizo family. The main parties we need to consider here is the mom, Janet Arvizo, and then she had two sons, Star and Gavin. And Gavin was a cancer patient who Michael Jackson initially helped, paid for a lot of his hospital bills and things like that. He was very close with the family. And then ultimately, they also accused him of sexually molesting Gavin and Star.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell me a little bit more about this Arvizo family? What is it about their background and stuff that you think makes their case suspicious? Because a lot of people mention their background and they say, no, you've got to read into this family's background before you leap to assumptions that MJ is guilty of molesting this Gavin Arvizo kid. What was it about them?
Yeah, so essentially what Thomas Mesereau, Michael Jackson's lawyer, he's an amazing lawyer. He's up there with like O.J. Simpson's lawyer and everything. What he was able to successfully show was that this family, the Arvizo family, had a history of, committing fraud, basically. There was the J.C. Penney lawsuit, I believe it's called, where they were able to get $150,000 from a company by falsely accusing them of, falsely accusing them of certain crimes. And they've just had a history of, non-credible behavior. They were completely non-credible witnesses in this trial.
Yeah, because what I heard, as far as I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong, what happened with the J.C. Penney lawsuit was, I think they were caught shoplifting from J.C. Penney. A security guard then came out and challenged them, and Janet Arvizo, I think, sued them for the security guard molesting her or something.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much on the basics what happened. And they successfully got $150,000 from that. And also, it's not just, it was that, but there was other celebrities warning Michael Jackson of this behavior that they've engaged in. So Chris Tucker, for example, had previously said to Michael Jackson that he knew that family and that they were quite cunning and engaged in that kind of behavior. So there was a lot of red flags, I would call them, signs, just the history of the family, their credibility, and then other people that Michael Jackson trusted. Chris Tucker's a long-term friend of Michael's, who was telling him these things and making judgments about them.
How would Chris Tucker know this family? Like, what's the deal with, like, how are the Arvizos managing to, like, hang out with celebrities and get this reputation as these people that will just sort of leech onto people and extort money from them? How are they doing that? Did you know?
Okay, so Chris essentially met Gavin Arvizo at a benefit while Gavin was dealing with cancer in 2000, and that's sort of how they became friends. So I think I know a lot of the times with these things, it's just some people are just at the right place at the right time. So we had met Chris Tucker, and at that time it was very popular for people like within that area to be able to visit Neverland. So it wasn't just the Arvizo family. He had lots of children over. Sometimes, you watch these old footages on YouTube now, and there's 20, 30 people just playing at Neverland because he was friends with so many children and their families and everything like that. So that just happened to be one of the families in sort of this early 90s kind of era where it was quite popular for Michael Jackson to just become friends with relatively ordinary people that ultimately took advantage of him.
And I think it's weird that because from what I remember Chris Tucker saying, it's that MJ was maybe too trusting of people. So apparently Chris Tucker had said, Michael, this family is bad news. You don't want to let them in around you. They'll extort you in one way or another. That what they do is they go after celebrities and hang around with them and chase money, essentially. And MJ was just like, no, I love this family, and I wouldn't suspect that they'd ever do anything like this. And now, if this allegation is false, I mean, that was essentially MJ's downfall, that he was just too pure and trusting, essentially. But one thing you mentioned about the cancer, Michael Jackson paid for Gavin's cancer treatment, right? Now, why on earth would they want to destroy Michael Jackson if he had paid for their son's cancer treatment? Because that sounds one of the most crazy things, right? It's like you've potentially saved someone's life and then they would falsely accuse you of molestation. Does that not sound fishy to you?
Well, George, you're a good and honest person, so of course you're going to see it that way. But if I was a, person seeking money, seeking to screw someone over so I could get more money, I would see, oh my God, look at this stupid rich idiot. He just paid for my son's cancer. What else can we get from him? Like, that's essentially what happened. You will never see it that way because you're not that kind of person. But if someone's just like leeching off you and you're just giving more and more, if you're that kind of person, the next question is, how much more can I get? And they saw what happened in 93. They saw the $20 million payout that the Chandlers got, and they just thought, oh, I'm next, I can do this as well. And it's just anyone who spends longer than 20 minutes reading about the 2005 trial itself, not just the family background, not just the dynamics, but the actual trial. I mean, you don't even have to download the court transcripts. If you just read a few articles about the character profiles of these people, the way she portrayed herself, the mom Janet, the way she portrayed herself on the stand, she was very inauthentic. She was snapping her fingers at the jury, which they really didn't like. She was explosive, and she was like turning dramatically, like doing all these just really bizarre things. She was not a credible witness and a star. He was described by a lot of the media outlets at the time as just a completely helpless hapless victim. Like he was completely hopeless, even when the prosecution was prompting him, like pretty much asking questions so he could answer them in a way that would show Michael Jackson was guilty. And the questions were quite, formed to help him prove Michael Jackson's guilt. He still couldn't do it because it was a lie. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
they would completely just not credible witnesses for the prosecution.
Were any molestation claims made about Star, or was it just Gavin from the Arvizo family?
From memory, it was both of them. And it wasn't just molestation. They were claiming things like Michael Jackson gave them alcohol and called it Jesus juice and said they should drink it. Those are like the actual terms they said that Michael Jackson gave them. Jesus juice, that he showed them pornographic magazines.
Yeah.
There was all these other surrounding allegations. I think it was 14 allegations all up, and he was acquitted, meaning he was found not guilty on every single one of them. And it wasn't just, there's more evidence on Michael Jackson's innocence than there was on his guilt. It was the evidence provided from the prosecution was absolutely ridiculous. It was laughable, and it was a media circus because everyone expected it to be, oh my God, now we have this millionaire pedophile that's gotten away with everything, and he's definitely guilty. It was completely blown up. But people actually sitting in court and the lawyers actually seeing what was happening, it was an embarrassing failure.
Now, there was obviously this huge and very controversial documentary around the time, Living with Michael Jackson, with Martin Bashir, who's the British presenter. And he had grilled MJ at one point in this. So MJ's, being very hospitable to him and, welcoming into his home and stuff like that. Yeah. And then there was one segment in it that maybe got a bit sort of nasty, where he started asking MJ questions a lot of the public wanted to hear, because so many people are suspicious of Michael Jackson because he's letting all these children into his house and into his bedroom and stuff like that. What do you remember about that documentary and what Martin Bashir had said, and do you think Martin Bashir had a point in any of this?
No, I think Martin Bashir is a complete slimeball. Like he's a totally dishonest person, and in that documentary the clips were heavily edited because a smart move on Michael Jackson's part was to have his own camera when that documentary was being filmed. So Michael Jackson had his camera crew, and Martin Bashir had his own camera crew. And then when he released that documentary, and he had edited clips to make it look like Michael Jackson's relationship with the kids was actually weirder than it actually was. And we can have a discussion about that, because I do have nuanced opinions on how appropriate Michael Jackson's relationship is with these children, even though I think he's completely innocent of sexual, crimes. We can talk about like the social inappropriateness if you want. But yeah, and even so, he's heavily edited these clips to make it look like Michael Jackson like could be guilty, or that he's having inappropriate relationships with them. And after Michael Jackson's death, he actually said that he didn't actually believe that he was like he more or less admitted that what he did with the Living with Michael Jackson with that film was biased and like edited in a certain way to get publicity. And he expressed regret for certain things that he said or done after Michael Jackson's death, because I think he felt bad. But yes, when you watch that documentary, you can tell it is made in a certain way to make you think certain things. But then you watch the other one that Michael Jackson made after it came out, because keep in mind that even though he was grilling Michael Jackson in, it seems like he's grilling him in the documentary, really he was being his friend. Like the whole way he's like, oh, I want to do this because I want to show your innocence. That's what he said to MJ. Yeah. He's like, I want to show, like, so we need to ask these questions because I want you to be able to tell your side of the story.
That's what TV presenters do. It's so sleazy when they say that. So we want you to be able to tell your story, and then they're like, to the,
It was a complete hash job. Like it was just so bad what he did, and he got MJ's trust, and that's why MJ agreed to do it with him, because he's like, oh, I've seen your work before. You're a good filmmaker, documentary maker, whatever. He was quite a popular personality at the time. So Michael Jackson trusted him, and that's why he was so open. That's why he's like, why can't you just share your bed? Why can't you do this? If it's not sexual, if it's like completely pure intentions and you're trying to help these young children and families. Again, we can have a discussion about whether it's appropriate to do that. But essentially, he was trying to prove his innocence. So basically Martin Bashir like screwed him over really, really badly. And that helped the Arvizo family, make those allegations.
All right, yeah, because another thing that I that I thought looked kind of weird when I watched that documentary, and I guess a lot of people think looks weird and makes them assume actually MJ's guilt, is that scene where I think he's lying back on the sofa with Gavin. Gavin's only like a 14-year-old boy or something, and they're like holding hands, and like they've got their heads on each other's shoulders. Like it looked as almost like they were in love. Like, do you know what I mean when you watch that scene?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we can't have this discussion without me saying what I think about his relationship with kids.
Yeah,
I don't think it is like even his relationship with Jordan Chandler. I don't think it is socially appropriate to be having sleepovers and to be being that close as a 40-year-old, however old he was, 30, 40, with a 13-year-old kid. And my same thing goes with him and Gavin, even if it's 100% pure, and I believe that it was, even nothing's going on and it is a healthy relationship, it's just not a good idea because you've already come under scrutiny. It already brings bad press. People are already looking to screw you over for your money. Like, just stop doing it. So I think it is weird. And I think to understand his relationship with Gavin and his relationship with Jordan, you have to understand his own childhood. He never had one, basically. And he said this over and over again. And people that have studied the man that is Michael Jackson understand this about him, that he was completely deprived of his childhood. At 9 years old, he was working in strip clubs. He was singing and performing, and he didn't have one. He has a very complicated relationship with his father, who used to verbally and physically abuse him. So as he got older and became successful, all he really wanted to do was hang out with kids and play the PlayStation or whatever, go for water fights. That's really what he wanted to do. And people that know him the best, like Macaulay Culkin, like Chris Tucker, they say this about him. And if you don't understand this about Michael Jackson, you're not going to even come close to understanding why he wanted the friendships that he wanted with young boys. And people say, oh, why young boys? It's like, well, because that's what young guys want to do. When they're 10 and 13, they just want to hang out with each other. And that's kind of how it was. He misses that affection. And if you don't understand that, you're never really going to understand why he's not guilty.
Now, speaking of Macaulay Culkin, I'm going to play a clip now of him. Because how often did Macaulay Culkin go around Michael Jackson's house? Could I just ask?
Oh, I mean, they were good friends. They were good friends that, think back from when you were 9 or 10 and you had friends that you hung out with and had water fights with and stuff. That's essentially what they were. Yeah.
So I'm going to play a clip now of Macaulay Culkin because he's someone that the media often asks, what the hell happened? Because he was around there all the time when he was a kid. So I'm going to show you now, show everyone listening now, what he said when pressed about by a news presenter. Did anything ever happen between you two? It was on the Larry King show.
What happened at the house? That's what all these things that people are
that's
concerned
what's
about.
so weird,
What did happen?
Nothing happened, I mean, nothing really. I mean, we played video games, we played it as an amusement park. Well, the thing is with that whole thing is that, they go, oh, you slept in the same bedroom as him. It's like, I don't think you understand. Michael Jackson's bedroom is 2 stories. And it has like 3 bathrooms and this and that. So when I slept in his bedroom, but you have to understand the whole scenario. And the thing is with Michael is that he's not very good at explaining himself, and he never really has been, because he's not a very social person. I mean, you're talking about someone who's been sheltered and sheltering himself also for the last 30 years, or and so he's not very good at communicating to people and not very good at conveying what he's actually trying to say to you. And so when he says something like that, people, he doesn't quite understand why people react the way that they do.
Why do you think he likes young people so much?
It's because the same reason why he liked me was the fact that I didn't care who he was. That was the thing. I talked to him like he was a normal human being. And that's what, and kids do that to him because he's not, I mean, he's Michael Jackson, the pop singer, but he's not the god of, the king of pop or anything like that. He's just, a guy who's actually very kid-like himself and wants to go out there and wants to play video games with you.
Did your parents encourage it?
They weren't against it. It wasn't like they encouraged it or pushing me upon it. It was just kind of like I wanted to hang out with him, and they were fine with it.
So what do you make of what he's going through now?
Like I said, it's unfortunate, and it's a circus right now.
You think it's a bad rap?
I think so, yeah. I mean, listen, look what happened the first time this happened to him. If someone had done something like that to my kid, I wouldn't just settle for some money. I'd make sure the guy was in jail, and it just really goes to show. I mean, as soon as, they got the money and they ran.
All right, so Macaulay there, very adamant that nothing ever happened. And one thing that always struck me, actually, that I don't think was well known enough from that from MJ's side of the story. Everyone always talks about I think there's a massive misunderstanding of the term share your bed. And I think Macaulay hits the nail on the head there, that MJ was so crap at explaining himself, because I think he had this very naive, kind of weird worldview that he didn't really have this mind like other people have. So when MJ was saying, share your bed, you know, I like to share my bed with children. And he actually said this in the Living with Michael Jackson documentary. No, I never got in the bed with the child.
Yeah.
I would sleep somewhere else. And Macaulay Culkin saying Michael Jackson's room had 2 floors, several bathrooms. There's several beds in it. So what Michael Jackson meant when he said share your bed is give your bed to someone, allow them into your house, and you give them your bed as like a. And I think a lot of people have mistook that as in Michael Jackson was literally snuggled up at night, like in his boxers next to like Macaulay Culkin and Gavin Arvizo and Jordy Chandler and all these other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's such a weird, the first time I watched that, it really shifted, because I was in the process. When I first started looking at all this, I was just like everyone else. I thought it was guilty just because I was brainwashed. But this was one of the things that really made the psychological ground shift in my mind, you know. And the way Macaulay Culkin talks, you can just tell sometimes he's so sincere, you know. He obviously knows Michael really well. He understands the situation, and he's kind of just like, nothing happened. Like, this is what it is. This is what his room is like. It's very credible, in my opinion. And even though at that specific time, I think the specific situation we are referring to, Michael wasn't in the bed with them, he has actually slept in bed with the kids. Like, he says that as well. Like, we all just jammed in the bed, and then we go and see the hot air balloon. That was one of the footage that was used in the documentary that Martin Bashir made. So there were actually actual situations where he was literally sleeping in the same bed with kids, but it was like some big fucking sleepover. It wasn't, you know, pedophile night. It was literally he had the mindset of another 13-year-old, and he was just friends with them. And when you see him interact with kids, it's not predatory. Like, I don't get a predatory vibe from him. He's just one of them. And he likes hanging out with them.
Yeah, I also think it was interesting what Macaulay said in that clip about everyone who's accused him. They've just taken the money and ran. They've not like actually, it doesn't seem to be about justice to these people. It doesn't seem to be about locking like an evil paedophile away, which is surely what you'd want to do. If you knew a serial child molester, you'd want them put away, right? Instead, it seems so far from discussion, like what these people are doing is just, as Macaulay says, this just like, it seems like a way to make a quick buck.
Yeah. And I think related to that, there's this whole idea that if someone's rich and famous, they're never going to be put behind bars, or they're never going to, it's hard to establish their guilt. If they're in a position of privilege or anything like that. But if you look at the reality of Hollywood, that's simply not true. I mean, there's a actor, his name's Roman Polanski, and he defected to France because he was convicted of sex crimes. So it's not impossible, you know what I mean? And their guilt is reflected it's in the legal conviction, because it was proved beyond a reasonable doubt, which means a lot of evidence in real life that he was guilty of, you know, doing things with minors. But it's in the consensus as well. Like, you can see the way he acted. He's left the country. He's never defended himself. That he's guilty. With Michael Jackson, there's no such consensus. Because
just going off on that, what I was just mentioning there was like maids and security guards and stuff weren't there, and this again just adds to the whole suspicion around MJ. So not only is these kids and their families coming forward and accusing him of sexual abuse, but you also have people who worked at Neverland saying, no, they're telling the truth. I saw this. I mean, who were those people and what were they saying? And how do you, Pat, refute those claims, you know, that what they're saying is valid?
Yeah, so there's been a number of maids and security guards and various people who have accused Michael Jackson of similar things. The most prominent one that comes to mind, her name is Blanca Francia. And she basically said that she saw Michael Jackson in the shower with a small boy that she thought was Wade Robson. And then later she also got her son to testify, who was 24 years old, at the 2005 trial of also being molested by Michael Jackson. And that's the same 2005 laughable trial that we just went through. And again, their claims just are not credible. You know, that I'm pretty sure she kept changing her story and things like this. So everyone that has come forward with an accusation against Michael Jackson, they either have not been credible or there's been some ulterior motive. And sometimes, as in the case of 93, that ulterior motive is just, we have hard evidence of that motive. You know what I mean? So I've yet to see a proper credible witnesses in the eyes of the law, because we can objectively determine what a credible witness is, come forward.
Well, the thing I'd heard about some of these staff, I don't know which ones in particular it was, if it was Francia or it was another maid, but I swear there was one, or maybe it was at least two maids, had actually been fired from the Neverland ranch for stealing. So they've been caught stealing shit from MJ. He fires their ass. And then they run to the papers and say, oh, yeah, he's, I saw him molest some kids.
Yeah. Yeah, they sell their story for like $20,000 or $50,000. Yeah, it's just behavior of self-seeking people.
Yeah.
No, like I said, I've yet to see a credible witness, and I'm more than open to new evidence being presented, but it won't, because we have a history of really, unreliable witnesses and evidence, and we have a history of Michael Jackson's good character. He was humanitarian. He gave millions of dollars to charity. He actively participated in activism, for Black people, for minorities, for the environment. When you consider everything from a high-level point of view, it's really difficult to see any of this disparaging claims against him as credible.
I mean, one thing in particular that I found weird about this Arvizo case, I'm generally not a fan of body language and stuff like that, as in, you can tell by their body language they're lying. You can tell by their body language they're telling the truth. But Gavin Arvizo's body language, when he was being interviewed by the police, and they were trying to prosecute MJ for this, that did strike me as suspicious. I'm not talking about like the way he was saying things or anything like that, because I don't think you can tell from that. I think victims of horrific crimes like sexual assault and rape and things like that, there's no telling how they act in a police interview. They could be quiet, they could be teary and emotional. They might even sound weird and chirpy and upbeat. You actually can't generally tell. But what struck me that was weird about Gavin Arvizo is that he looked like bored. Like there was this one bit in the interview. Do you remember it, where he like scrunches up a piece of paper? He's like lying back with his like legs crossed, I think, and he just gets a piece of paper on the table, scrunches it up, and just like throws it in the bin, as if. And that kind of struck me as if he was kind of saying, as if he's trying to kind of going in his head, "Mom, really?
Yeah.
Do we have to kind of thing like it?" I mean, yes, okay, you might react differently if something horrific's happened to you, but if you're in a police interview about it, you wouldn't be bored. You might be tense, you might be anxious, you might be nervous. You'd want to tell the story though, but you wouldn't look bored. That was what really struck me as weird.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I've seen like some of that footage. I think we've had a previous similar brief discussion about this before, but I don't know if I agree that you can't judge someone's authenticity or someone's honesty based on their body language, because there's a whole field dedicated to that by psychologists and psychiatrists who, and even when the jury are making decisions about someone's reliability on the witness stand, they consider things like body language and how honest someone appears to be, how consistent they are in their speech. So it's not just what they're saying, it's their body language as well. You know what I mean? So I don't really know if I totally agree that you can't make some kind, like you can't take into consideration at least the way someone is acting, because my experience tells me that often it does play a big part. Like I can usually tell when someone is being honest about something or not, just emotional intelligence, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree. He acted bored. He acted like, like, do I really have to do this? Yeah, it was very suspicious.
Yeah. And I mean, the actual trial itself, so it goes to trial. Now, usually if something goes to court, someone's been charged with something, it actually goes to court, especially in rape and sexual assault cases, because they're extremely hard to gather evidence for. It's extremely hard to prove rape and sexual assault, right? So how does this MJ case get to court? What do they find? What are they charging him with? What's the evidence that he's actually going to court with?
Well, basically, they were using the statements of the accused, and they sort of tried to rely a little bit on the 93 case as well to show there was a history, inverted commas. And Sneddon was on this case as well, so he was really dedicated to having the case go to trial. And also, Michael Jackson wanted to this time because he didn't want to have another thing swept under the rug. He wanted to show the world how ridiculous these accusations were. So he was more than willing to have it go to court.
That's another weird thing. Yeah. Like, why wouldn't he just pay these off? Why? So if he paid the first lot off, is it like he changed his mind, or is it like...
I don't think he ever changed his mind, because I don't think he ever wanted to sweep it under the rug. Like I said, he was acting on the advice of legal advisors and their rationale. This time he put his own rationale towards it, because he's like, if I keep paying people off, then it's rarely going to look, because he wanted the first time was the first time, he wanted the problem to go away and just stay away. But now that it keeps happening, in his mind, he needed to prove that he was innocent, and not just innocent. He wanted to show that these accusations were ridiculous, as was the first one.
Yeah.
So it was just a different rationale.
And the result of this case is he's found not guilty on all, was it 14 counts you mentioned?
14 allegations, completely acquitted of all of them.
And
acquitted,
Yeah. And have we heard anything from the Arvizos since, or have they just sort of faded away into the darkness?
More or less faded away. I think the Leaving Neverland documentary maker, Dan Reed, reached out to Gavin if he wanted to be involved in any of his future projects. I don't think Gavin wants to. They've pretty much flown under the radar since then. They don't seem interested, or, they don't seem like they support or don't support Michael Jackson. I think, like everyone else that gets involved in these ridiculous media circus cases, just want nothing to do with it afterwards.
Yeah. Now, you said the first case, Jordy Chandler, was more of the grey area, which I think is actually the most damning one, that it's bullshit because of that leaked phone call. That for me is like a sort of smoking gun in that just shows that one was a complete hogwash. So what makes you say that the Arvizo case was more contentious? Because for me, this one sounds less like that. This one for me is like, well, we just don't know. Like, how, I mean, we can, I believe in innocence until proven guilty. But if you were to tell me, if you were to put a gun to my head and say, which one are you more sure he was innocent with? I would say absolutely the Chandler case. What makes you so sure then that the Arvizo case, he's innocent?
Yeah, I come at things from a legal framework, a legal background. Yeah. And so just from that perspective alone, this is a case that went to trial, got laughed at, and he was legally acquitted. It's an open and shut case. So things were objectively found. You can objectively say Michael Jackson never did these 14 allegations. It was, how long did the trial go for? A couple of months or something like that. The defense provided a very strong case for Michael Jackson's innocence. The prosecution provided a very weak case, to the point where they didn't really have a case at all. So we can say objective things about it because it was determined under law. With the 93 allegations, even though the facts were just as weak for Michael Jackson's guilt, it never went to trial. So I guess as a lawyer, I'm not in a position to say it's more convincing than something that was legally found to be ridiculous.
And how unanimous was the jury in the Arvizo case that that they gave the not guilty verdict?
Okay, so regarding the verdict, it was deliberated about 32 hours over a week. Yeah. So initially 9 jurors voted to acquit Jackson, while 3 voted guilty. So that was the ratio.
And I guess that's, for me, what makes this one sort of more shaky than the first one. So that's the thing. I think people will still be suspicious over the Arvizo thing. I think for me, the main thing that makes the Arvizo one suspicious is the history of the family. This just seems to be what the Arvizos do, is that they extort money from people. And she had done it before, Janet, with JCPenney. But yeah, it doesn't seem, unfortunately, that the jury was so convinced on, fortunately for MJ, enough of them thought that there was not enough evidence. But what do you think put that inkling in the 3 or so jurors' mind that, no, he was guilty? What do you think it was that made them say, no, I think he's guilty? What kind of evidence did they have?
That's the thing. I don't think it's based on evidence. I think it's based on this believe all accusers. It's based on feelings, because if they're going by evidence, what evidence? Like, they were proven to be unreliable. They were making inconsistent statements. There was no hard evidence. They were actually shown to make such statements that were inconsistent, that it actually helped Michael Jackson's innocence. So those three that voted that he was guilty, I think they were making an emotional vote. Maybe they were just try to like play it on the safe side, or adopting that mentality that was becoming popular in the 90s to the 2000s to what we're seeing now of believing all victims, not based on evidence. Because I'm not convinced that there is any kind of evidence, and that's what we should really be making decisions on, not on, oh, but what if he is, let's just vote guilty just in case he's rich, and what if he's just taking advantage of these people and they just don't know how to act. That's not an informed decision. So there's always going to be some kind of, in every case, there's always going to be some disagreement, because not everyone's a rational thinker. But I think any rational thinker would come to the conclusion that the 9 other jurors did come to.
Yeah. So now I want to move on to the most recent case that is really fresh in everyone's mind. And that was what was displayed in the now infamous Leaving Neverland documentary, directed by Dan Reed. And Dan Reed is very convinced, it seems, of MJ's guilt. And he even said about Macauley Culkin, we played that clip earlier, but I think his refutal of that was, well, that's like someone hanging around with Jack the Ripper and someone saying, and they say, well, Jack the Ripper never killed me, so therefore he didn't kill other people, and that kind of thing. So he, he seems to, he really wants to tear MJ apart for whatever reason it is. And he seems to, maybe he knows, he spent a lot of time, obviously, with Safechuck and Robson, the 2 accusers in this, and he must think that they're being really genuine. But tell me, what is this case about? Wade Robson, so we got these 2 people, Wade Robson and James Safechuck. Who are they? What are they claiming has happened?
Okay, so just before I answer that, I just got to quickly say that Dan Reed is a failed movie maker, and he wants to make a documentary that's going to get attention and money. So that is his motive, because if you look at his history of documentaries and films that didn't get any attention or any real success, so this was his opportunity to make a very publicized issue blow up. So that's my thing on Dan Reed. Regarding Wade Robson and Safechuck, to start with the Wade Robson, I think we should go back to 2005. Actually, I know we just finished there, but they used Wade Robson to testify for the innocence of Michael Jackson and his good character, etc. Because Wade Robson was the strongest witness, and was like one of the friends that were probably closest to Michael Jackson at the time. And they used him specifically because he knew how not guilty Michael Jackson actually was. And he was, he was grilled by the prosecution. Thomas Mesereau says this in a lot of his videos that he talked about. So that was how confident Wade Robson and the defense was of Wade Robson's, innocent relationship with Michael Jackson. So if we fast forward now to 2017, 2018, when these allegations are happening, he's completely changed his story. And when you look at the history of Wade Robson's relationship with Michael Jackson, there's just video after video after video of him talking about what a great guy Michael Jackson is. This was up until like 2009, 2010, 2011. And then all of a sudden his story changed when he, encountered money problems, and, the Jackson estate didn't want to put him in certain projects that they were, that they're currently working on. And this is when the allegations started coming about. And it's a similar kind of story with Wade Safechuck as well.
James Safechuck.
And James Safechuck. It's a similar kind of story happening there. They're both suing the estate, or they tried to sue the estate for, I think Wade Robson's one was like $1.2 billion, and Safechuck's one wasn't that far off. So there's obviously a monetary motive behind that as well. And both their cases, keep in mind, initially were thrown out by the court on what we called a summary judgment motion. And that means that the verdict is already so obvious that it's not worth going to trial. And the judge decided that for both those cases.
What did they accuse Michael Jackson of, and when? Like, when are they saying this stuff happened?
Yeah, so for both of them, it would have been around the early 90s. And they're basically accusing Michael Jackson of repeatedly raping them, like having a full-on sexual relationship like a boyfriend would. Like, they said the relationship was normalized and it was like romantic. And that's how it's portrayed in Leaving Neverland as well, which is really disturbing. It's portrayed as some fucked up love story, even though it was they're trying to portray Michael Jackson as a predator and abuser. It's also portrayed as like this really weird, disturbing love story between them. So that's basically what Wade and Safechuck are saying about Michael, that he abused them for several years and normalized the abuse. And that's why it was never abuse until they were adults and they realized it, and all these convoluted stories.
Now, I just want to play a few clips, sorry, from Thomas Mesereau, who was Michael Jackson's defense lawyer in the Arvizo case, right? He was Michael Jackson's defense lawyer.
Yep.
So this is Thomas Mesereau, Michael Jackson's defense lawyer, who is adamant to this day that Michael Jackson is innocent of all wrongdoing. And he's talking here about, it's Wade Robson, isn't it? That he's talking about. Okay, so this is him talking about Wade Robson.
Yes, and I believe in the experience that I had with one of the accusers. I interviewed Wade Robson for hours before he testified. I interviewed his mother and daughter before they testified. I called all three as witnesses. They were among the most powerful witnesses in support of Michael Jackson. Mr. Robson was a very articulate, likable, intelligent, seemed like a nice person. He was adamant that Michael Jackson had never done anything improper towards him at any time. The mother and sister backed him up. They had traveled with Wade and Michael Jackson. They had slept in Michael Jackson's bed. They said nothing improper ever happened. And they were so strongly in favor of Michael Jackson and so strongly against the prosecution of Michael Jackson that I made them all star witnesses for the defense. Well, remember, one of the top sex crimes prosecutors in America, Ron Zonin, and I've never faced a better prosecutor than him. He was really just a passionate, skilled, experienced, determined prosecutor. He subjected Wade Robson to withering cross-examination, and this man knew how to question a sex crimes witness, and he could not shake Wade Robson. Wade Robson stood his ground, maintained his story under all sorts of pressure, and was also adamant, always adamant, that Michael Jackson never improperly touched him.
You don't think Michael Jackson has molested one single person?
I do not. I absolutely do not. And I sat with him for 5 months, 5 days a week in a criminal courtroom, watching not just the Arvizo allegations, but other allegations being made against him. Allegations that he had molested Macauley Culkin. Allegations that he had molested a whole bunch of other people. That experience seared into my soul a very strong belief that Michael Jackson never molested anyone.
Okay, so this sounds crazy to me. So Wade Robson has testified at this trial, not as a child, but as an adult. Am I correct? In 2005, he was an adult.
Yeah.
So
he would have been an adult.
He's testified under oath as an adult that Michael Jackson has never molested anyone, including him. And he's being cross-examined like hell under this guy that Mesereau says is like a really, really sharp prosecution lawyer, probably the best he's come across. And just nothing, and he's unshakable. Now, a lot of people say this stuff. They say stuff like, no, but a victim can testify, and because they have feelings and they're being manipulated by the person and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, okay, I would understand that 100% as if he's a child. But for me, this sounds insane that he is testifying under oath as an adult and he's protecting his rapist.
Yeah, it's insane because it's not true. Wade Robson, people need to understand the procedure and process of testifying under oath and everything that they went through. It's not just, I put my hand on a Bible and I'm going to swear to tell the truth. There's rigorous explanations before that. There's processes where the lawyers, grill them essentially what exactly they're going to say. And then the prosecution, obviously, a stellar first-rate prosecutor in Thomas Mesereau's eyes, and he's like one of the top lawyers in the US. And they couldn't get to him. It's very, I'm sure, I think you're right with that. There are certain ways people can act if they've been abused. But this is just it's too big a pill to swallow that he's just protecting. And then when you consider everything else that we're about to discuss, it becomes very clear that what he was saying in 2005 was the truth, and what he's saying now is complete lies.
Yeah, because one thing that Robson and Safechuck both said is that when Michael Jackson was raping and abusing them when they were children, he would say the old paedophile trick of if you tell anyone about this, both you and me will be in a lot of trouble. So this is how paedophiles are successful, have they over their victims. This is how they often get away with things. because they tell the child, you will be in big fucking trouble if you tell anyone, you'll get sent to prison, blah, blah, blah. So you can completely understand if this is an innocent little child, taking the witness stand. But the point is, when you're an adult, you know that that's bullshit now, right? You've gone past that. You know that, oh, actually, no, children aren't legally responsible. It's always the adult's fault. They get sent to prison. So I just see no motive whatsoever that Robson would have to defend a serial child rapist and his own rapist taking the witness stand. I mean, what possible motive could he have? And what is he even saying? What's his excuse? Why, when people say to Wade Robson, what the fuck are you playing at? What does he say?
Well, their stories are quite similar in that they're saying that the abuse was normalized well into their adulthood, and they formed some kind of loyalty to Michael Jackson, where they didn't think, they felt guilty and they didn't think he was really doing anything wrong. And it wasn't until they were well into being fathers that they started worrying about their own kids' well-being. So that's kind of the justification they put forward. But that explanation is not really backed up again by any evidence. It's just something they've concocted. With the case of Wade Robson, he was actually dating Brandi Jackson, which is Michael Jackson's nephew, niece, and she was with him this whole time during the time frame that he's making these accusations, like the time frame that he said all this stuff supposedly happened.
While he was a teenager, he was with her.
Yeah, for several years they dated, as teenagers. And if anyone wouldn't have any insight into the relationship he had with Michael Jackson, surely it was Brandi Jackson, who was around the whole time, who was spending all this time with Wade Robson. And she's actually been featured in another documentary where she's basically just telling him to stop lying, and when he started his relationship with Britney Spears, I'm pretty sure he was still with her. So it's like, I don't think all evidence points to him not being a very credible witness. And that's also backed up with Brandi Jackson, accusing him of lying, which I think is true.
So the whole time he's with Brandi Jackson, he's never said a thing to her about your uncle is doing this.
No, because he wasn't.
Everything's just, yeah. Now, we've spoken a lot about Robson. Where was Safechuck in this trial? Was he involved in the Arvizo trial at all?
Apparently, he was. There's a bit of contention around whether he was one of the signatures, like whether he signed a document that said Michael Jackson never did anything inappropriate with him and other children. So I think he may have been like a signatory person in one of the documents, but he wasn't part of the trial. He wasn't. I don't think Wade Robson. I don't think Safechuck was actually that close with Michael through the year. There was a stage where maybe in the early 90s they were hanging out a bit, but I think that sort of faded away. So I don't think he was even really spending that much time with Michael Jackson in the times that he's accusing him of doing all these horrible things. Yeah.
Now, the main hole, I guess, people poke in Safechuck's story is that Safechuck claims he was raped repeatedly in the Neverland train station between this year and that year.
Yeah.
What was the problem with that claim?
Yeah, so basically he basically said Michael Jackson abused him in every corner that he could think of Neverland. And he could think of things because obviously children visited there quite often. And one of the places he named was the train station. In the late 80s to early 90s, the problem is the train station wasn't built until after 93. And there's actual documents for that. There's like the actual paper people have got from the council that approved the train station being built in 1993 from the California Council or wherever it was. So the director, Dan Reed, has said, he just misremembered the date. But the problem with that is fine, he just misremembered the date. But by 93, and it was like late 93, 94, he would have been about 16 or 17, Safechuck. So that goes against like the entire narrative of Leaving Neverland, that Michael Jackson only goes for 10, 11, 12-year-old, 13-year-old boys. You know what I mean? And that was happening as an adult as well. It completely contradicts the story. And the fact that he's, lying about the train station, because that's very hard to believe that he forgot the year that he was sexually assaulted repeatedly at a train station. Yeah.
So I've just read here the construction permit proves that the Neverland train station was not built until 1994.
Yeah.
And he's claiming he was being raped up until 1992.
Yes.
Which is when he was 14. So he was 16 when the train station was built.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's a contradiction there. Well, firstly, it's suspicious because he can't even remember the year he was supposedly sexually assaulted. But just say he misremembered. He was a lot older than what is being, and that still would be highly, it would still be illegal and disgusting. But it's just one more thing that adds to it is still a contradiction, because the whole point of Neverland is that Michael Jackson fell in love, or made like some really young kids fall in love with him, not older teenagers or something like that. And there's so many contradictions with Leaving Neverland. Another one that comes to mind is this use of the alarm. They said that Michael Jackson had an alarm in his room to alert intruders so that he could be warned, because he was molesting so many kids. But at the same time, so this is what Wade and Safechuck said about like the alarm. But at the same time, they were accusing Michael Jackson of abusing him in every single part of the house, like in the room, on the, in the cinema, wherever, without any real court. Like, it's like he didn't even care if he was caught. So why the hell would he have a alarm system when he's just abusing them freely every single place? And this is like one of the things that shows that Leaving Neverland is not credible at all.
What was the deal with Cirque du Soleil? I've heard quite a lot about one of them was maybe rejected for Cirque du Soleil or something. What was that all about?
Yeah, so that Cirque du Soleil is a project that the Jackson estate were working on. It was basically meant to be, I don't know everything about it, but basically it was meant to be like a tribute, a dance, performance, a long performance tribute to Michael Jackson. And Wade Robson wanted to be one of the main dancers in that, if not the main dancer. And the Jackson estate weren't really interested, but Wade Robson, they had some kind of correspondence, and Wade Robson was really keen for that. And when they said no, I think this helped build up resentment, and it was kind of before he was making those allegations, obviously, but it was not long after that he started making the allegations. So even, it's hard to believe, you know what I mean? Like, so when he was pressuring Jackson estate to hire him as a dancer, was he still not aware that Michael Jackson allegedly sexually assaulted him? It makes no sense.
And would you say this was his motive in going after the Jackson estate, as it were? So he's asking for $1 billion or 500 million or whatever the hell it is from the Jackson estate. Do you reckon that's his main motive, that he's just pissed that they rejected him for this Cirque du Soleil thing?
I mean, I think it's just one of the pies in the pot. Like, it's one of the things, but he's also, if you look at the history of Wade Robson, he's got money problems, he's got financial issues, he's got issues with his career, because he was meant to, like, he was successful kind of in the early sort of days, but then his career sort of was floundering around a little bit. And I think to get it back on track, he just needs a lot of financial help, and he wants more publicity for who he is. So this is just the easy way out, I think. But I don't think it's just a Cirque du Soleil thing. That was just one of the things. He kind of just wants to be successful now, and this is what he's doing to try and get it.
How do you refute the claim that people say this can't all be bullshit, because why is it always boys? Because usually when paedophile, rape allegations and stuff, I think is mainly women, right? But with Michael Jackson, it's mainly boys, and that seems to show some kind of pattern that, yes, clearly Michael Jackson was a paedophile, specifically attracted to underage boys. You don't have a single girl come forward. What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, if we're looking at if you're looking at why does Michael Jackson continuously hang out with boys over girls, I'm not sure if that's even true. I mean, when you look at his friendships, he was friends with Macauley Culkin and like different sisters of people, and they would all sort of hang out with him. So it just could be by chance that these accusers have happened to be male. But I like, if you're looking at the reason as to why he prefers a company of young boys, I'm not even sure if that's true, because I think he was friends with a bunch of kids when they were all staying at Neverland. It could just be because that's what he wanted as a kid. He just wanted to play with his friends, and a lot of Michael Jackson's personality can be understood through his missed childhood. Like when you read his biography, Moonwalk, and what other people close to him have said, is that he likes hanging out with people that he would have liked to have spent his childhood with. And when you're a 10-year-old boy, you usually just want to hang out with other teenage guys. So I think that's what's happening there with these friendships. I'm not sure why the people that have come forward happen to be male. I think it might have something to do with the 93 case, and that kind of set the standard. Oh, this 13-year-old guy got $18 million from Michael Jackson. Maybe we can do that as well. We can set some kind of narrative. I mean, these people aren't completely stupid. They'll look at how the history has formed, whether it can be believable or not, that Michael Jackson abused this supposed person. But yeah, I think it all comes down to that basically. But if you're trying to determine someone's sexuality, you can look at, their possessions, what's on their computer. When they did that with the 2005 trial, which was investigated obviously by the Californian state police with the assistance of the FBI. The FBI wasn't directly, in the case, but they assisted the Californian state police. They looked through his pornographic magazines, his computer. There wasn't a drop of pedophilic material or child pornography or any of that illegal shit. All his porn was heterosexual, Ralph magazine or whatever it is, FHM, that kind of thing. No homosexual material whatsoever, none, no gay porn or anything like that. He was a heterosexual guy, and this, you can usually determine someone's sexuality by looking at their browser history if they didn't delete it. So yeah, that's really strong evidence, because with the majority of other criminal cases, you can determine what someone's sexuality is by looking at their private possessions. And there was just no hard evidence of Michael Jackson's supposed pedophilia or his accused homosexuality, which he wasn't.
Well, they did find in his house, I believe, magazines, like art books and stuff like that, of naked kids though. So what was that? How do you respond to that when you say they found all those magazines and books of naked kids?
I mean, I have so many books at my place. You could probably pick up an art book and find a picture of a naked boy, because that's what art is a lot of the time. In the romantic period and all this kind of thing, children are looked at as angelic and beautiful. That doesn't make me a pedophile, and that's just my small library. If you go to Michael Jackson's house, he would have had a whole fuckload of books. He
so
was a well-read person. Well,
I think
it's like going to a library and then accusing that library of being pedophiles because they have an art book.
Well, Michael Jackson this guy would have literally had a library in his house. And that's the crazy thing. Right. I think you've made a fantastic analogy there. It would be like accusing the library of that. So they found this stuff in his house, and people say, but they found this. But then he's probably got also 600 books of naked women, 600 books about World War II, 500 books about ornithology, 400 books about television programs. He's got a whole library in his house. These might even be books that he hasn't even glanced at, essentially.
Oh God, I mean, this is the 2005 trial. All this information is public. Every single transcript, every single possession that he had is all public information. You can download it. I've downloaded some of the transcripts myself, and it lists every single pornographic magazine that he had, and it's hilarious. It's Girls on Girls. It's Ralph this, FHM that, one Playboy, just stacks of Playboy. He was a heterosexual man. He loved women. He was in love with Diana Ross for the majority of his adult life. Once you really understand who Michael Jackson is as a person, I don't mean to be black and white about some of the issues that we're talking about, but the fact is a lot of them are black and white when you look at the evidence.
Yeah. So what was this? I swear you remember you telling me something ages ago about a magazine or something. And I think this was in the Arvizo trial, and it was involving Mesereau. What was something that was very fishy about the way one of the Arvizos reacted with regards to a pornographic magazine in that trial?
Yeah, so basically, Mesereau showed Star, the youngest brother, a pornographic magazine and asked him, is this one of the magazines that Michael Jackson showed you? Obviously in an attempt to seduce the boys, allegedly. And Star responded quite affirmatively, yeah, that definitely was. And then Mesereau revealed that magazine wasn't published until August 2003, which was actually 5 months after the family stopped visiting Neverland. So he was able to show that, just the lie, the witnesses were lying. That was just one of the examples. I'm sure there's many like that.
Damn. And going back to this trial and going back to Mesereau, what is this? I want to ask you this from the perspective of a lawyer. What is the significance? Because Mesereau seems to really drum this point home in that clip I played of him earlier. What is the significance of calling someone as a first witness? Because Mesereau is saying, I felt so confident in him that I called him as a first witness. What's the significance of that?
We're talking about Wade Robson, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so the first witness, usually your first witness in a criminal trial, is your strongest witness. It's the person that you have the most faith in, that they have the most knowledge and the most experience of the person that you're trying to prove the innocence of. So basically, he had so much faith in Wade Robson to tell the truth and to do a good job of defending Michael Jackson that he's the first witness, because that's how it usually goes. You put your strongest witness first, and then everyone else is kind of ancillary to that, or maybe just as strong, but not. The first one is the most, often is the most important one, and it's it's the impression that you're going to put on the jury as well, because
Yeah.
it's the first person.
And do you think, I mean, I guess it would be like really fishy, right? If MJ was to like turn him down as a witness, but the fact that MJ was like, I mean, would there have been a process where MJ would actually have to accept him as a witness? So Mesereau would have actually said to him, like, how about we use Safechuck as Robson as your first witness? And MJ was like, yeah, go for it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like, let's draw a name out of a hat or let's just pick your 5 best friends. They would have like considered every single person that was close to Michael Jackson, who could do the best job, who could speak the most fluently and honestly.
Yeah.
It's a whole process, it's not just like, oh, you okay with this mic? Yeah, I'm fine. Like they would have discussed his relationships in depth before choosing a witness in this highly publicized, high profile trial.
Yeah. So it's like MJ kind of wanted him to be a witness because MJ was so adamant himself that
absolutely.
Robson would defend him.
Yeah, and he said that. He had complete faith in Wade Robson to speak confidently and he did, as we have discussed. The prosecution grilled him and he never shook. Like, even if he was a little bit like nervous or anything like that, he still just had so much faith in what he was saying and just he believed what he was saying because that was what reality was.
Yeah. So what would you say is the shakiest thing about the leaving Neverland thing? What would you say is the smoking gun? Like I keep saying, for me, the first allegation, the Jordy Chandler allegation is the weakest mainly because of that leaked phone call. Now we've discussed a lot of things here that make this look really fishy, but what would you say is the thing that makes you just say this is complete bullshit?
With Wade and Safechuck?
Yeah.
Leaving Neverland? Oh, it's hard to narrow it down to one thing. There's a number of factors which make it to use the criminal law terms, beyond reasonable doubt that Michael Jackson is still innocent and will always be. They've come forward years after it actually happened. There's rules in law that make it like you can't bring about an action for sexual assault. Like you can't accuse someone of sexual assault after a certain amount of years. Usually, in most countries, that's about 7 years. So they're pretty much well outside that. So that's the first flag. The history of Wade Robson continuously defending Michael Jackson up until recently, where he can make money, is another thing. And just understanding, it's hard for me to pick out one thing, just because I've gone through these cases quite a bit, that I understand it as a whole rather than just individual things which make it unbelievable. It's just a history of false accusations and a history of Michael Jackson having a strong defense for his character and for his innocence. One more thing that I did want to mention as well with Leaving Neverland is Safechuck's his legal documents outlining what happened to him. A lot of it is directly, you could argue, copied from a book called what is it? The Diary of Jordan Chandler, which is a fictitious book. It was written by a disturbed individual, but basically he romanticized the story between Michael Jackson and Jordan Chandler and made it look, so it's written in the first person, has Jordan Chandler, even though it's a fiction book, and writing about like his romance with Michael Jackson. And like the things, some paragraphs in Safechuck's in Safechuck's legal documents are copied nearly directly from that book. I'm trying to think of examples now. I think the thing with the jewelry, him buying him jewelry, and there's a specific lines that are taken from this fictitious book written about the 93 allegations, which is I don't know how anyone can really take this seriously once they read about it.
Yeah. And I just want to another question I have from a legal perspective here. I don't know if this will be your field because you're obviously qualified in Australian law, but why the fuck has Robson not been prosecuted for lying under oath? Because his claim now is, yes, he did do this and he is a child rapist, yet he's sworn under oath as an adult in court that he wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, so certainly there's a case for that. I think one of the legal terms is estoppel. So you can't say things that are contradictory to things that you have previously, sworn under oath.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know if anyone really cares enough about him to bring a lawsuit against him because he's already causing so many problems. Bringing another counter lawsuit against him is not really going to help, the Jackson estate or anything like that. There is a case for that, absolutely. Even though Australian law and American law is different, there's certain rules about perjury and lying under oath, or like telling the truth under oath and then going back on that, like the estoppel rule.
Yeah, another
definitely legitimate.
Yeah. Another question I had, coming from the legal side of things. I don't know how relevant this is to the case at all, or if it even matters. But what the hell is a subpoena? Because I keep hearing it in this case: subpoena, subpoena, subpoena. Thomas Mesereau keeps mentioning subpoena and this. What is that?
Yeah. So essentially, a subpoena is a writ or a document compelling someone to attend court. I wouldn't say it's especially unique to this case. It's very popular. It's just a popular legal procedure that's used in all cases that go to trial, because people need to be subpoenaed if they can't be found, or if it's difficult to identify, where they are. A subpoena will be used to compel someone to attend a court hearing, any kind of court hearing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was just want that just settles that for anyone wondering, because I know a lot of people will be wondering.
Oh yeah, the legal jargon's like annoying sometimes.
So, I guess that is there anything else you want to mention specifically about Robson and Safechuck now, just before we discuss a few final things about MJ's history and stuff like that? Is there anything else you think is
the well we could go down with the Leaving Neverland documentary and its inconsistencies is a lot. There's a long list. There's, for example, there's the jacket that was burnt in the Leaving Neverland documentary, has some big sensational thing of Wade Robson, or it might have been Safechuck, letting go of like the horrible memories of Michael Jackson, and then it was later found that the original jacket was actually auctioned off, so that was like fabricated,
right?
Like a jacket they just put in the documentary and said it was Michael Jackson's, but it wasn't. So there's a lot of little things like that make it. It's not even really a documentary. A documentary is meant to present the facts and look at both sides and look at evidence. This is just two people telling stories of things that probably never happened.
Now, one thing I swear was a contradiction as well is, like, at the time all this was allegedly happening, and in the Arvizo trial as well, Safechuck and Robson's families never said a bad word about MJ. But then in Leaving Neverland, I think they're involved in it, and they're making these accusations against him. Do you know much about that? Was anything weird happening there?
Yeah, so from the best of my knowledge on that, we can just see a similar pattern emerging. The mums for both sons started off having a very good relationship with Michael Jackson, and if anything, they were pushing their sons into Michael Jackson's circle because they wanted them to succeed in entertainment and in dancing. And they've never said anything about Michael Jackson being predatory or anything like that up until this Leaving Neverland documentary now comes out. We can see they're helping to push that narrative that he was in fact predatory, and that he was a danger to their son's well-being. But prior to that, and prior to having a ulterior motive, we've never really seen any tension or anything like that between Wade Robson or Safechuck's mums and Michael Jackson. So
yeah. Now, just summing up now, we can just talk about like a little general thing towards the end of the podcast. So we've discussed all the allegations and stuff. Just on Michael Jackson generally, and like his history and stuff like that, and legal stuff. I guess one thing that really strikes me kind of in favor of his innocence here is that serial pedophiles, they tend to leave a trail of digital evidence, especially. I think the FBI had Neverland on lock for like fucking 11 years or something. They seized like 20 hard drives or something from Leaving Neverland. They don't find a thing, not a single shred of evidence. They don't find a sexually suggestive text. They don't find a single sexually suggested fax. They find porn sites on his hard drive that are all adult sites. And here was the juicy bit. Apparently he had like he had like usernames with like certain porn sites. He was like called something like Mr. Jackson or Dr. Black or something like that. He'd like, so like many adults, he watched porn and stuff, but it was all just between consenting adults. They don't even find a single dodgy thing on his hard drive at all. Now, so again, like every single case there's ever been against MJ, it's just been anecdotal. The police find absolutely nothing. The FBI find nothing. There's no digital evidence whatsoever of any crime. And this is apparently over a guy who's raping multiple kids all, throughout the years.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this briefly, but absolutely, there's no digital evidence. There's no any kind of evidence. But yeah, you're absolutely right in that in the majority of cases, there will always be some kind of evidence of like illegal porn or something like that on a predator's computer, and it wasn't just they took one of his computers. You mentioned that the whole of Neverland was locked down for months. They searched through his stuff. The FBI was involved. Come on, like what more evidence do you need to prove that someone is not guilty? Like you've pretty much covered it with this point of digital evidence.
Yeah, they're extremely thorough. I mean, you're talking forensic computing and stuff like that, and
multiple hard drives, multiple computers, Neverland,
Especially with, and I mean, the Arvizo case, that was in the digital age as well. That's 2005. You're talking text messages and stuff like that there, and you see absolutely nothing with the text or anything like that.
I mean, because I haven't really, because most of the people that seem to be engaged with this are from the MJ fan base, but I just got reminded of a Richard Dawkins quote where he says that just because there are two polar extremes doesn't mean that the middle is always, that there is a happy middle. Sometimes one of the polar extremes is just correct. Like he's using that discussion in terms of atheism and religion. But I think that it can be applicable here as well, just because it seems like I'm on the polar end of things, that he's completely innocent. And on the other side of the polar end is that he's guilty of all these horrific crimes. Just because I'm on a polar end of the spectrum doesn't mean that I'm wrong, or doesn't mean that there's automatically just a more negotiable happy medium where maybe he did some crimes but it wasn't as bad. We got to look at the evidence, and the evidence points to my position.
Yeah. Were you ever throughout your life, Pat, convinced otherwise? What did you ever think in your life that maybe MJ could be guilty?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Before I even looked at the case, so much of our media is just brainwashed, and the media is like at least partially or wholly responsible for the image that's been portrayed of Michael Jackson as like a serial pedophile, as a molester. Because when you're not directly critically thinking about these issues and not looking at it properly, not looking at the court documents, you're just going to read what's in the New York Times or what's in Vanity Fair, and they're just going to publish what's the most salacious. So they're not going to get much hits by giving like a objective court breakdown of what happened with the 2005 trial. It's not going to be like, oh, Michael Jackson's actually innocent. Or there's actually not much evidence to show that he's guilty. They're going to publish something like billionaire pedophile, at Neverland. They do what gets the clicks. And whether it's been influenced by other, because he was a very powerful entertainer. He had more power than a lot of corporations put together. There was a lot of people, this is like a subject for another, can't really get into it now, but there was a lot of people wanting to take him down because he had so much power in the industry. He owned the Beatles. He owned 70% of music. There was a lot of power play going on at that time in the 80s and the 90s. People wanted him dead because he just had too much power over the music industry and these different institutions.
Can you recommend to the listeners anything to watch or read or listen to or whatever that you think builds a very convincing case for MJ's innocence?
Yeah, I think the Square One documentary that recently came out, I'm pretty sure it's available on YouTube. I wish it was made available on another platform like Netflix or Stan or something like that. Square One is great. There's the michaelallegations.com. That's just a website, but it's gotten everything in really neat like columns that you can just go to the 93 allegations, or you can just go to the 2005 trial. And it's very comprehensive. It has all like the proper resources and stuff. Yeah.
Pat, I will leave you now to make a final statement, I guess, where, please convince anyone listening now who is, who has any fiber of feeling within them that Michael Jackson could be guilty of anything, doing any of these things he was accused of towards children. Pat, what would you say to those people, and what is your
anyone with still any kind of doubt or any kind of feeling, that's all it is. It's a feeling, because there is absolutely no evidence, no hard evidence to prove that he is guilty of any of the horrible things that he's been accused of. And I think if you don't have an evidence-based worldview, you're not thinking rationally or critically, and you're not going to come to an objective conclusion. And I'd also recommend you look at who the person Michael Jackson was, and not just what's being said about him by mainstream media outlets. But if you are actually really interested, to consider like the court documents and looking at what actually happened to get an unbiased view of the man. And I have to stress again that in our criminal justice system, like from a legal perspective, the burden of proof is on the prosecution. It's not on, obviously you have the defense as well, but in general, it is the it is the responsibility of the person making the accusation to prove that Michael Jackson is guilty of those things. Not only have they not done that, there's just a mounting evidence, a huge amount of evidence to show that he was a person of good character and that he never did the things that he was accused of doing.
Yeah. Well, Pat, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope I somewhat did it justice. And yeah, I think it's been a great discussion.
All right, we'll leave it there. Well, thanks so much for listening, everyone. Do let us know what you think. We'd love to especially hear from you if you think this podcast made you convinced you otherwise of Michael Jackson's guilt. So do drop a comment below on the YouTube. And yeah, see you again next time. And thanks for tuning in.